first question that I want to ask Bill after formally saying welcome is, Bill, from your experience, how does the fact finder process help an agent build trust with their clients that will ultimately influence their decision to work with an agent?
Thanks, Kev. Welcome, everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces on there. It's nice to see it. Like, before I answer that question, let me explain to you a little bit about fact finding. Fact finding is not about facts, it's about feelings. And it's about how the person you're talking to, how they feel about their facts. So there's an art to it and there's a science to it. The art is black and whites on that form. The science is how you say those things, not only through your tonality, but your body movement, how you hold your hands, how you do all those things. Um, a couple of tips on this too, just before we start. Um, Once you understand how someone feels, then that directs the fact finder, and you'll learn that. A couple of things, tips too, is I never socialize ever with a prospect or a client. I never go to lunch with them. I never play golf with them. I don't have any relationship with them outside of business. And I know that seems strange because lots of people, but I've chosen the other direction. So completely separated myself from any other relationship to him, other than business. In the last 12 years that I was selling actively, I was 100% referral based. And every referral came from the fact finder. And as I mentioned to Kevin, I did a live performance of this in Austin last summer, and I'll send the link over to him, and you can see it. How you get referrals from fact finders. The other thing, I know this will shock everybody. I'd never do annual reviews ever. I never call a client and go over when I get the annual reviews. And the reason I don't is because that makes me a proactive seller. In other words, we need to review your policy by the way, and maybe we should buy this other annuity. I don't ever do that. I follow the business model of CPAs, and CPAs are reactive. And so I've chosen on my business to be reactive because when a prospect or client calls me with a question, then that puts me into the position of dominance in our relationship in terms of suggestions. So I am not proactive at all on that. Plus, the products I sell are, they get annual reports. And if they have trouble with understanding them, those things, somebody will call me on it. So anyway,
Right.
back to your question. So the question was, how does fact finders work and how do they ultimately influence it? Well, it's pretty simple, really, when you think about it. It allows me to ask general questions that require an answer that the prospect probably has never really been asked before. And if you can ask those questions and you can poke around you, there's a lot of ways to ask questions without directly asking them, then it'll open up opportunities and chances to expand that into uh, facts that will help you work on making a sale out of this thing. So that's really how the fact finder is. And I'm very casual about my fact finder, completely. In other words, I've done fact finders on the back on yellow pads. I've done them on the back of envelopes. I've got the fact finder you see right there is the fact finder, my basic fact finder. And I keep my notes on those things, and that's how I do it. But you can do it lots of different ways. And you don't, as you go along on the fact finder, you don't have to follow down an order. There is one essential, important, absolutely do not miss part of the fact finder, and it's at the beginning of it. I don't know if you want to talk about that next, Kevin, or what do you want me to do?
What I want to do next, just to help
Just go
some
down the list.
agents understand is, in my mind, Bill, and this is what Bill was just talking about, get the facts, cross that out, and it's more about feelings, right?
Right.
What you elaborated to that, Bill? Is there any special way that you change a question from a question that sounds factual to a question that sounds more like a feeling?
Yeah, I'll teach you all my bridge, how I move from the fact finder to the close. I'll explain to you how I expand a relationship with a question. And I'm going to give you the most powerful question. I've had agents come to see me in Olympia zillions of times, and I just teach them this one question. I'm going to teach everybody that question, that answer now. But are you want to follow down that list that's on there now, Kevin, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, this page that's up right now, it says, what's the purpose? I think this is the question
Yeah,
that you were referring
it
to.
is. It is.
Let's talk about this power question.
Okay. So this is the most important question you can ever ask a prospect. And you have to ask it in a certain way. And then after you ask the question, you have to have a certain amount of well, feelings how you ask it. So if I say to somebody, if I ask them, I said, if you have an IRA, for instance, yes, I have an IRA. Well, what is the purpose of that IRA, and what do you want it to accomplish? Now, the first person that talks loses. That answer will always be a feeling answer. And that with that answer will let you know whether you can have that money or not have that money. As a good example, if someone said they have $50,000 in a savings account, and I say, what's the purpose of that $50,000 and what do you want to accomplish? If they say to me, well, I'm saving for a boat, then that means that I cannot have that money. That is his money or her money. That's important money. But if they say, I don't know, we've just saved it for future use, well, then that's my money. Then I know I can, in my recommendation, I can get that money because they haven't directed it for any particular thing and they have no feelings about what they're going to do with that money. If that money is saved for a boat, then they're feeling about the boat. I can't have that. So this question right here, during the course of Fact Finder, I would ask probably between 6 and 10 times. And you can't ask it always the same way. You change the way you ask it with tonality and with body movement. So if it's really important, I'd lean forward and say, hey, what's the purpose of this, IRA, and what do you want it to accomplish? And the first one that talks will be that person, and they'll tell you how they feel. Or if I've asked it 2 or 3 times in a row, I might move back in my chair and say, well, tell me what is the purpose of that? And what would you like it to accomplish? That is how you build relationships with during a fact finder. That is how you find out how the person really feels and what money you can have and what money you can't have. It's the most powerful question you can ask. Even if you're not doing a fact finder, even if you're just visiting with somebody and they say, oh, I've got this annuity that I bought 10 years ago. I'm not, well, what's the purpose of that annuity and what would you like it to accomplish? See, it should become part of your daily sales routine. I never talk to anybody I don't ask these questions. And it can be the simplest things, and a real simple question. But what it does, it gets people thinking. And that answer, if they truly will answer it, that's a feeling answer. And fact finding is about feelings. That's all it's asked. All right,
Awesome.
Kevin.
Thanks, Bill. Hey, I want to jump down, and I'm just going to scroll through this booklet a little bit. When I was reading through it, this page right here, page number 6, it said, "What to have your client bring." I was a little bit confused about how you communicate this expectation to a
Right.
client.
Right.
What can you share with us there?
So, a little history about my background is when I started in the annuity industry in the early 90s, I created a seminar system that ran for years and years and years. And in that seminar system was a little questionnaire, and I call it the green sheet. And when people would come to the seminar and they were coming to pick up the information they requested from me, or I was going to their house, if I saw on there that they had clicked lots of topics, and that, in other words, instead of just saying, yeah, I want information about this, they'd click lots of different things, then my caller would call and say, "Hey, we've got all the information requested. I noticed you had asked for lots of information. Listen, Bill can help you on lots of different ways. Let me give you a list of things that would really help that he can answer your questions for. You should bring your brokerage statements. You should bring your most current bank statement. Lots of people bring their tax returns. Why don't you throw it in? If you have any pension 401ks, or if you have any life insurance, especially if you have any old life insurance. By the way, before we get off the call today, I'll give you one of the best tips in the world about life insurance. And just bring him along, and Bill will answer. He'll have all that information, and he'll be able to answer any questions you have. And that's how I did it. And as many of you know, I didn't do my own calling for appointments, so I had a caller. And if there was nothing checked on it, like somebody says, "Yeah, I want your Save Money book," and that sort of thing, I didn't tell our caller didn't tell them to bring anything. They'd say, "Hey, if you have questions, write them down, and Bill can answer your questions while they're here." And so that's how we get these there. And it is absolutely amazing. I would have people bring me their wills, and it is amazing what people will do. And that's how I was able to expand the relationship by basing on what they'd marked on the green sheet.
So based on what I'm hearing you say, Bill, I'm just going to repeat a little bit so for clarity in my mind. One way that you transition would be people who attended the seminar and they completed the green sheet, and they had indicated a desire to meet with you. You had someone call them and schedule a time to meet and say, please, here's some things that you might want to bring based on the information you provided us, and they followed that script. What
Right.
about somebody that you might have met? Let's say, for example, you met at a restaurant just in the course of conversation. They're like, "Oh man, I need to have a conversation with you," and you're reaching out to book a follow-up conversation with that casual person you meet. Would you have that same conversation?
Yeah, if the conversation was going towards a meeting, I would say, I have a lot of information about different topics. If you'd like to bring your brokerage statement or your bank statements with them, I can review those for you and show you where you may be paying some additional fees that you probably didn't know you're paying. A lot of fees on brokerage statements are voluntary, and maybe you've got one of those. I'll help you with it. But I would just expand it into that. I didn't care about their tax returns. It makes no difference to me. Pension statements and brokerage statements are usually brought in the same time. And bank statements are not as important as you might think. The key here on this is brokerage statements.
Okay, great news. Let's jump
And just
forward.
visiting with people. If you're just visiting with people will visit with you about anything. I mean, if you can set yourself apart and you do that with tonality and with caring and with how your body language is, and by smiling and being nice and offering free information, people will pretty much do anything you ask.
Awesome. Thank you. So you've met with the person at what, let's say, at a seminar. You've had someone called and set the appointment for you, or if you're a sole operator, you've called and set that appointment yourself. And now you step into their environment, and we have this on page 7, this getting started right. How do you
Yeah.
transition from they're a little nervous that you're in their house or you're in a quiet place to meet? How do you transition the "hi, how are you, good to see you again" into a conversation that is fact finding in nature?
Yeah. Um, so just to back up a little bit on things I did, I never met anybody in a restaurant at all, any public place, nothing like that. It would either have to be in their home or in my office.
Okay.
And the reason why, there's a certain amount of secrecy you want to contain. If I'm at a Denny's having coffee and trying to do a fact finder, they come fill a coffee cup up and it ruins the whole thing. So I know some people teach that anywhere it's convenient, but I don't, because I have to have control of this situation, and I have to have control of this situation, and I am going to control it by how I ask questions. But so I don't want anything where I'm in the middle of a tonality change, or I'm in the middle of a body movement. I don't want I don't want anything to interrupt on it. So that's how I did it. And so the most important question, are you going to scroll down a little bit, or did I
Yes, sir.
the secret word? All right. So this is look, you look at all this stuff. I'm not going to write that down. I'm not going to write anything down. But one of the most important things about this form on top there, there's two things. One, it says confidential. If you have a fact finder and it's not in red, have a red marker and write confidential across it. I've never had a fact finder ever that didn't have red at the top that's confidential, and I make darn sure that the prospect sees me using that. But of all these things on here, like Social Security, why would I ask that? I already know her telephone number because Betty's called. I don't care about her date of birth, any of that stuff. That's all of that there is to be filled out later by by myself or by staff. But you can set the tone on the seminar or on the excuse me on the fact finder here with one simple thing. So let's say her name was Doris, and I would say, by the way, what would you like me to call you? And you be quiet on that. And because if that name is different than Doris, I have entered her world. I will always remember the coolest one I ever had. I have no idea why I remember it, but her name was like Doris or something like that. And she goes, "Oh, my name's Doris, but my friends call me Red. You can call me Red." And I called her Red that whole fact finder, and I wrote a huge case off that because she had let me in. I had now got through the door. I now had something that's so you always ask her, by the way, what would you like me to call you? And if they say, well, my name's Doris, call me Doris. Great. And so by that, you have built a relationship on that simple little thing about asking them what name you'd like to call them. And if they're
Awesome.
both spouses there, you can ask it, well, Joe, what do you like to be called? I like to be called Joe. Great. So yeah, I just write their names down. I don't fill any of that other stuff up. That's staff stuff or that's information I already have.
So one area that I have always been taught, Bill, and this is it jumped out at me when I was looking at page 8 on this fact finder, was people like to talk about things that matter to them. And I noticed that there was a whole page dedicated to talking about family.
Right.
What are a few tips you have about when you start talking about family?
Right. So I say, tell me a little bit about yourself. Do you have children? Yes. And so that I say, they'd tell me their names, I'd say, well, great. I said, where do they live? Do they live close by? And so let's say the child's name is Joan, and I say, where does Joan live? Well, Joan lives in Chicago, so I'd write Chicago over there under state of residence. Why would I care about that? Because there will be a relationship between that child and that parent that I will uncover that will give me an insight into what her financial world is or what her problems are. So if I was, let's say his name is Joan, is in Chicago, and I say, oh, do you have grandkids? Yeah, Joan has two children. Wow, Chicago's a long ways. And then I put my phone down or my pen down. I say, wow, long ways. Do you ever get to see Joan and the grandkids very often? That is a power question, my friends. Ask that question. They will tell you more about what's going on in their relationship, and that relationship carries over into every part of her life. Well, she and her husband got divorced and they live over there. I don't see them very often. I really miss them, and so on and so forth. So you can ask that about all sorts of things about the family. In other words, where do your kids live? Are they close by? And if it's in the same area, say, oh, isn't that wonderful? Do you get to see the grandkids often? Isn't that great? You can see tonality changes and body movement changes. All this changes on how you do that, and they'll tell you everything about them, absolutely everything about them. Or they might say something like this, well, uh, my daughter's in, said, you see her often? No, she has cancer and she's going through treatments right now. If you can get that deep in it early on where they tell you about things that are going on in their family, I assure you, you can ask Red any question you want and they'll answer it. And you build this foundation by asking about these simple questions like that, which in the world of fact finding, I assure you, there isn't anybody in our industry that will teach you this. But you must build the foundation, and you build the relationship, the foundation on it by asking these simple little questions about it. So if I say to her what you find out about her daughter and her grandkids, I can ask her, how much did you pay in taxes last year? She'll tell me everything on this. So this is how you build the foundation on it.
Awesome. Thank you. we jump down here to, this is an area, page number 9, and we're not going to go talk about every single page, but these are areas that jumped out at me when I
Right.
was reviewing this.
Right.
Um, and
So I would say to her on this, look, let me ask you a few questions here so I can better understand your situation. And I'm not going to gloss these over. I say, do you have a financial planner? Anybody or a financial advisor? The way I would say that, hey, do you have anybody helping you with your retirement planning? Do you see on the left there where it has one, that little code
yeah,
on there?
yeah,
Do you have anybody that's helping you with your retirement planning? That's the way to ask that. And she'll say, yeah, it's the Edward Jones guy down the street and so on and so forth. Or no, I'm doing it myself almost entirely in my target market, which my target market is probably different than your target market. It's always somebody at the bank. Well, Joan at the bank is helping me with it. And so that's really, really important. And then I would ask her, I said, lots of people in our state, and I live mostly in California, use living trust to avoid probate. Have you set one up yet? And that the reason why I'm even asking that question is to see what kind of planning she may have had, because there are lots of peddlers that sell living trust. And so if yeah, we have a revocable living trust. And I said, oh, you had your attorney do it, right? Well, no. Then she says, well, this guy came by and sold us his trust. Then I know that doesn't deal with people on a professional level much. She's a more of a common approach to it, and it gives me a little insight into how she would go about planning.
okay.
And then I always ask her, do you have a will? And if the answer is yes, I'd say that's great. If the answer is no, I said, you actually do have a will, because if you don't write it down yourself, the state of California or the state of Idaho, whatever it happens to be, has their own will for it. And it might be a good idea to consider getting a will, because then you're telling everybody where you would like your assets to go. I would say probably more than half of the people I deal with do not have a will. And I see Steve Kirby on the call. We've had this conversation a lot with his clients. Same thing. They just don't do it, but they should. And I always ask about income. Scroll down just a little bit more, Steve. Kevin. Talk about this, ask them if they have other assets. Ask her their assets. Because what? Maybe they have a rental income. Why is that important? Because that rental income is exposed to long-term care charges if she ends up having to go into long-term care. So that's an asset that could easily be lost if in the event that Red had to go to long-term care, or her husband did, and there's no way to protect that asset as it's currently stands. So find out about that. That's a pretty common question. And this would be a question that most agents won't ask, but it's key to it. It gives you more information to deal with on a nonchalant question. Do you own real estate? Yeah, we have a duplex in town. Oh, great. Well, I'm sure that extra income is just great. Now, do they have an attorney? I normally skip this because I would have probably got a hint on it up above about the revocable living trust. But it's a good question to ask. Sometimes if I'm in the mood, I'll ask about it. But generally, most people don't have an attorney, or they'll say, "Oh, saw this guy 20 years ago. I guess he's my attorney." I don't think it's particularly important. But what is
So,
important is this about the CPA, and that's number 6, is you never ask them if they have a CPA. You always say, by the way, who's your tax preparer? And why is that? Because most of my target market people, where I've sold giant amounts of annuities, are people that don't have CPAs. They're people that go to the tax preparer. So if you say, who's your CPA? And they're going to a tax preparer, then they're going to say, oh, I must not be good enough. I don't have a CPA. So you enforce that. You reinforce that by saying, by the way, do you have a tax preparer? Who's your tax preparer?
what I'm hearing you
This
say here, Bill, that just jumped out at me is, don't feel like you have to check every box every time you do a
no,
fact
no,
finder. It's dictated on the conversation that you're having with the person that's sitting across the table from you.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I want to jump down to page number 11 really quick, because
All right.
these are financial goals. This is an area where, quite honestly, the reason that this jumped out at me is the first time that Milana and I were thinking about having some kind of assistance in our planning. We reached out to someone locally. We didn't know them from Adam. They never came and had a fact finder with us. They basically sent us a 19-page booklet
Yeah.
and they started asking me questions that I wasn't prepared to share with somebody that I didn't know anything about. So if you wouldn't mind just telling why it's important that these financial goals questions get asked. And the
Right.
biggest question I have is, do you ask them and ask the person to give you a scale of 1 to 10, or is this a form that you hand to them and they fill out?
No, it's a form I don't use, but I put
Okay.
it in there for lots of reasons because it reminds the agent that you need to have this information.
Okay.
So what I say, and I said, look, here's a little chart that we use and it has to do with your taxes and grandkids and all sorts of things, and you can kind of rate what you want on there. But if you look at everything on here, what would be the maybe the two most important things? Oh, by the way, before I'd say that, I would say reducing taxes and increasing my income. I would mention those on there. And those are the two questions that are, or the two answers that are always given. And so I already know the answers. They want to reduce their taxes, they want to increase their income. So this allows me to bring this out and say, look, there's things you should consider about estate planning. You should consider about who's managing your money. Do you want, how much growth do you want? Are you willing to take risk? All that sort of thing. And but the two answers will always be those two things. They want to reduce taxes and they want to increase their income. And I kind of feed that information into them, and you'll always get a positive response on that. That's what they those are the two things that are the most important down. I
Just
don't know if I answered it the way you
a couple
answered.
other pages I just wanted to point out from my perspective, and this is strictly very heavily influenced by my personal interpretation. But if I go to page number 11 here, um, this best practices thing jumped out at me as something that we might want to talk about just for a second.
Well, so they do. Clients' answers are always income, increase income, and that. But what I do then is I move over on their side of the table metaphorically, and I say, yeah, me too. That's what I always wants to do. But I found that most people don't realize how much money it takes to live a long life, and that running out of money is one of the greatest fears we have as humans in this. And so I say there are ways to take assets that you have and convert them into lifetime income. And if no one's explained that to you, I'd be happy to at least write it down for you. And I at least plant that little seed on it that, yeah, I'm scared to death of running out of money too. And so those are little things you can bring up, and then that then opens the door to the financial side is exactly what are your financials and how you go about doing it. Now, one thing that's, I don't know if it's on your questionnaire, but let me teach everybody on the call this little trick I've done. And so when I know let's say they have an Edward Jones guy, and I haven't asked him all the money they have in their categories and so on and so forth. I'd say, well, you mentioned you have Edward Jones. There's a lot of fees on those statements that I don't know if anybody's pointed them out to you. Some of them are voluntary. And I could take a quick look and just show you real simple. And then here's exactly how I say it, and I get nothing but nonsense from agents when I tell them this, but this is exactly what I say. I say, would you fetch your most recent statement for me and I'll take a look? Will you fetch your most recent statement for me and I'll take a look? And I've never had anybody not do it. And all I'm looking for is what the January, April, July, or October statements. And if they come back with the June, I say, oh, but could you get the July statement? July's where most of those fees uh, are illustrated on it, and they'll go back and get it. And then that gives me a chance to look through and see what it is. And if I say, I really need to do a little report on this for you. Would you mind if I took your originals with you and I'll mail them right back to you as soon as I get to the office? I'll make a copy of them and then I'll bring both copies back to you. If you do that and you tell them to do that, you have to mail them back that day. Go to the office, copy them, put it in an envelope, mail them back to them. Those are always the originals. They're always called the originals. And so you always want to hold those in high regard. And then when you return to do your close on it, then you bring the copies back for them too. Little deal.
Awesome, thank you. I'm almost done with what I wanted to cover on this booklet. When you and I were chatting, when we got to page 13, you mentioned that this was one of your favorites um, when you're
Yeah.
having conversations, and I think it has to do with the real estate part. Do you want to expound
Yeah.
on that a little bit?
So this is actually, I think, a really important question. So the way I would say this is, Red, hey, look, if you look at your house today and you're going to sell it to me, how much would you sell your house for? And of course, the answer is 99%. Well, the taxable amount is the amount we pay taxes on is $200,000. We'll say $200,000. It doesn't matter how you ask it. It's always, well, the taxable rate is that. And I said, great. I said, and may I ask you, is your house paid for? And if the answer is yes, great. Oh, mine is too. It's lovely to have that. That's a great option. If it's not paid for, now you have a great opportunity to find out deep, deep feelings about that. So I put my pencil down, I lean back, I fold my arms, I say, Red, this is unusual at this stage of our lives that we haven't paid off our mortgage. Can you tell me why? That answer will tell you more about Red and about her financial situation and what you can do than just about any question you can ask. Because she'll say something like, well, our daughter's sick. We had to borrow some money. Well, we got behind on our payments and we haven't been able to pay it off. And well, my husband was sick and on and on and on and on. That opens a lot of doors and that opens a lot of opportunities for them. And so they will tell you more about their situation, why they haven't paid it off. But you have to use tonality. You kind of lean back and say, Red, it's kind of strange at this stage of our life that we wouldn't have our house paid off. May I ask why? And I don't have a pen down. I don't have a paper I'm writing on. I'm asking her as a another human being. I'm asking her why is it this way? And that answer is about as good an answer as you can find when you get learning more about how she thinks and her situation on it.
Thank you for
You can
that.
always use other sources to pay it off too. Paying a house off isn't a big deal.
I wanted to jump to the bottom of this little training
Right.
booklet because the other pages are so well written that there even I understood it easily. But I got to this page and I just want the Bill Broach approach. What is
Okay.
Time for the Bridge all about?
Well, so I've now spent, look, I never spend more than an hour on a fact finder. I try and get it closer to 40 minutes, and I do watch that time. I am very particular about time I'm spending in that. And if I have a real talker, then I know that I'm going to get a ton of referrals. So I am going to be careful about my time on it. But when I get to this question, we would have talked about mortgages. We'd have talked about her brokerage statement. We had talked about banks. By the way, here I didn't mention this. Let me jump in quick on banks. So if you have somebody that's got money in the bank and say, well, what you don't say how much you're earning. You said, what interest rate are you currently enjoying? Okay. And whatever they say, I would say, gee, that sounds a little underwater to me. Let me call and see what rates really are, and I'll get them back to you. So you see it just like that. Gee, that seems a little underwater. Let me check, and I'll get you the current rates on them. Anyway, back to your question. So we had talked about all these things. I'd say, this is all a little confusing, isn't it? And I assure you, I've never been in a fact finder that somebody hasn't agreed with me. And they say, yeah, yes, it. I said, would you like me to prepare a little written report about what we've talked about, something that you can refer back to? And it's overwhelming. Oh, thanks, that'd be great. I'll say, great. I'll review the things we've talked about, and and maybe some recommendations and some things I think that might be a little better to help your situation a little better, and I'll get back to you. So so that's the bridge I use. I say, gee, it seems a little confusing. Would you like me to do a little written report and kind of review what we talked about, and I'll include some recommendations if I find something that makes sense for you. And that's how I do it. Now, word of the wise, my report is always 1 page long. It's never longer than 1 page. Generally, it's a half a page, and it's supported with third party documentation. So if she has 6 mutual funds at Smith Barney, I'm going to pull Morningstar reports up. I'm going to circle the fees. I'm going to circle the rating. I'm going to circle the yield. When I talked to her about mutual funds, I said, here's the documentation backing up what I've said, and I'm going to hand those to you. If she has a variable annuity, I'm going to do the same thing. If they have bonds, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look them all up, and I'm going to come in with 20 or 30 pages of supporting documents. But my close, I don't go over those with them. I might mark them in yellow where the fees are so they can find them. But my close is 1 page. And so my recommendation is whatever it was. And I'd say, well, that's what I would do if I were you. If you decide to follow my recommendation, give me a call and I'll get the paperwork ready. Now, almost all of my appointments were in the office, 95%. I would leave the office if someone was, if there's a medical reason, or they have to, I have stairs to my office, things along those lines. And I would say that my close rate was probably close to 100% if I'd gotten through the fact finder with it, because I really made the sale in the fact finder, and frankly, I'd already mentally spent the commission on it. But I would say, now I am not very good at doing paperwork. Would you mind? And I will misspell things. Would you mind if Betty came in and did that for me? Fill the form application out for you? And they always 100% agree. Now, why did I do that? Can I fill it out? Sure, I can fill it out. Do I make mistakes? Not really. I'm never going to make mistakes on that. But what I'm doing is I'm handing that relationship off to Betty. Because when I've handed it off to Betty, then she then becomes the source or the center on where those people will call when they had questions. And Betty's a very friendly, happy, outgoing person, and they loved her. But it frees me up from that because I can only do two things. I can do fact finding and I can close. Now, what wasn't mentioned at the top of this call is my horrifying fear of the telephone. I cannot use the phone to call people. Something about it when I'm calling to make an appointment, I can't get the words out. I'm terrible at it. So it dawned on me one day, why would I do things that are terrible? I should do things I'm good at. I can fact find and I can present and I can close. So I hired my own caller. And this is a guy, it was a man who was excellent at it. And he could call from his house and he had the gift of gab and he would be the one say, bring your tax returns, bring your stuff like that. And so think about that in your business. Why would you do things that you're not any good at? Or why would you do things that so you could hire somebody who's better at? Remember, the secret to selling these is the fact finder, and how you conduct yourself in the fact finder is where you will make all your money, and the sales will always be made right there. That's where you focus on as a fact finder.
There's two other things I want to cover really quick, and I love that it's at the bottom of this page where it says, "Are you finished?" No. Final tips. What's this all about?
This is where above when I was asking family questions, I make notes where they are, and I say, Red, look, tell me a little bit more about yourself. I know you retired from Boeing. Do you keep in touch with your friends? Do you have church activities? What do you do for fun? And she'll start telling. I said, oh yeah, do you have any neighbors out here who are also retired from Boeing? Oh yeah, and I write those names down. And when you're involved at church, what do you do there? And she'll say, well, I work at the food bank like Kevin and I do. Oh, great. And any of your other neighbors out here work at the food bank? Yeah, so and so does. Well, tell me about your hobbies. What do you like to do? And she says, I love to play golf. Great. Oh, I love to play golf too. Do you play at that little club in Shelton? Yeah, I really like it out there. By the way, are you playing any of the on Women's Day out there? Yeah, I have my friends out there. Then we go for lunch. Oh, great. Who you play golf with out there? I would probably know them, and I'd scribble a few names down, and I would go through that, and I could always get about 5 or 10 things but I'm not doing the fact finder. We're now back, and it's relaxed. I'm just asking her about her life, but I'm writing these names down. Because you get referrals not by asking referrals, you get referrals by feeding names back. That is where is the secret of referrals, is you feed these back, because she doesn't know if her best friend has a need for my services. I don't know if she does, But I say, look, you say you play golf with Mrs. Smith. I said, would you care if I gave her a call and introduced myself and told her that we were friends? No, not at all. I've never had anybody say no to me on that. So when I call, I'd say, hey, Mrs. Smith, I did friends, or what her names are. And she suggested that maybe I'd at least have the opportunity to come by and introduce myself and at least shake hands. And that's all I'm going to do. And so I'm going to meet her and say, look, I did some work for Mrs. Jones. Sometimes if you'd like to see the type of work I do, I'd be happy to show it to you. In the meantime, often I have information that's been beneficial to others. Would you like me to add you to the list? Never in a million years does anybody say no. So that goes into my Lead Pro drip account, and I'm going to become friends with her on that. And she's going to learn about me and about the ideas I have, and I'm going to stay in touch with her. And so, as I said at the last 12 years of my business was 100% referral. Never did anything but referrals, and that's how I got referrals. So then I would grow those referrals, and I would expand those referrals, and I would expand the relationship, and so on and so forth. And it's just simple communication. Anyway, that's
golden nuggets. There's one other topic we want to talk about for a brief moment before we open it up for Q&A in the last 12 minutes of this hour. And this is something I brought up. And when I brought it up, when Bill and I were chatting and I brought it up, he reminded me of something. I hope you have them with you, Bill. If not, I'll find the picture that you sent me. But the other piece of a suggestion, an invitation that I extend to all of you, take this fact finder, read through it a few times, and then start practicing.
Yeah.
Right? Practice. And Bill, do you by chance have your practice couple right there?
I don't, Kevin.
While we're answering Q&A, I'll find it and share it with.
I got him.
And share it with the group.
So this is hard to believe, but I have one great talent in this world, and that's fact finding. And it's nothing that came natural. I learned it. And I learned it from Northwestern Mutual, and Steve Kirby, who's on the call. We both joined Northwestern Mutual about the same time, and I learned it. And so I practice with it. And so I still have these. I don't know if you can see them. See those?
Yes, sir.
Get them back. They're like that. Is that clear? Ah, shoot.
Closer to your face. There you go.
There's he, and there's she. Anyway, they stand up. They got a little 3 holder on it like this. And when I was learning to do it, I'd set those on the table, and I had an 11 case cassette tape that Northwestern Mutual gave me, and I would get my fact finder form out. I would talk to my little friends, and I practice. And that's how I did it. So there's nothing wrong with practicing and learning how to do it. But these date to 1968. We found the cassettes are 1968 and these are 1970. For some reason, I've kept them all these years.